Is there anything that you would think of that you'd like to mention for those mothers who are taking their kids home to school?
There are so many different things that these criminal groups do.
From your experience and what you do, a lot of people are concerned about them going into schools and getting kids and
Going in on schools, and 99% of the people that are in there, there's ways.
thinking about the cartel, a terrorist organization. Do you think there's the potential for it to go kinetic, where we actually have tier 1, tier 2 elements going into Mexico and potentially taking out threats?
Cartels aren't doing that right now. It's a business. They're selling drugs, killing our people because of the drugs.
The drone thing is a whole different and fascinating way of seeing war.
The thing that fascinated me was this, just the noise of a zing coming in and watching the Russian troops, and then they're scattering.
If we continue to stop the movement on the border like we have been,
When you start affecting the bottom line, they're going to say, okay, what do we need to do to change that?
What's going on, y'all? My name is Vincent Vargas. I'm the host of the Time to Head North podcast, brought to you by the North Group. Security refined by intelligence. What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the Time to Head North podcast, brought to you by TNG, Security refined by intelligence. My next guest is Dan Brunner. Dan has been on a podcast, another podcast of mine. He is an expert in the field of, well, several different things. I'll let him explain it. Dan, if you don't mind, just giving your background for the audience.
Hey guys, and Vince, Rocco, I appreciate you having me on it. This is great. So I've been working for the government for 29 years. I was in the Navy for 9 years as an enlisted. Got out in 2003, right after 9/11, when I was an E6 in the Navy, and then joined the FBI straight out of the Navy. I got recruited by the FBI because I speak Spanish fluently, and went to the academy and went to FBI in Newark, New Jersey. Spent my entire 20 years there, with 4 years working international terrorism, 4 years working domestic terrorism, going after skinheads. And then the last 12 and a half years going after Hispanic organized crime. So, MS-13 was my lead dog. And then Tren de Aragua, Trinitarios, and then some cartel work, some, OCDF's work. So it was a great 12 years in New Jersey. And then I retired recently, about a year and a half ago. I retired and moved up here to Montana. Now I run my own private security consulting firm. And, it's just my wife and I, just the two of us running it up here. And, we've got a nice little thing going here, but I'm glad to have, to be here to help you guys out.
Absolutely. This podcast, we like to just kind of inform, the viewers of what's going on in the world. And one of the big ones in the media right now we hear is, one, the kind of the ICE raids that are happening because of the current administration, but also to the designation of the cartel being considered a terrorist organization. I would love to kind of give a good overview about that and why you believe that's a good or a bad thing.
Well, here's the thing is, so the administration has designated Mexican cartels, well, actually just saying cartels. So it could be Colombian cartels, could be, Ecuadorian cartels if they feel like it. But what they're saying is cartels, Tren de Aragua out of Venezuela, and MS-13. Now, first off, let me say MS-13, I think that's a little bit of a stretch to call MS-13 a terrorist organization. MS-13, for me, is a very well-equipped street gang, which is very violent. They're designated a terrorist organization in El Salvador, and part of the task force that I was one of the founding members of, Joint Task Force Vulcan, which is now the tip of the spear for the DOJ going after all these groups. So now Vulcan, they have charged a number of the senior members of MS-13 with National Security Division, terrorist type charges. And that was 2021, 22 that we were charging these guys. Now that they are terrorist organizations, there's a different feel to it, different things going on. But what I find is this: cartels and TDA are two, mountains of possibility. Cartels clearly have a lot of possibility. They have a lot of resources, a lot of weapons. They have a huge number. I would say, I've heard somewhere in the last couple of days, I've heard, 6 digits of number of resources, of personnel here in the United States. So, and that they are very well equipped with resources and weapons and material to support their activities, whether it be drug trafficking, and that clearly cartels have been moving into different types of areas, whether it be human trafficking, sex trafficking, real estate fraud. They're expanding their processes, not just drug traffickers. So they are extremely big gorilla. Tren de Aragua is a little bit of a different one. They are kind of a hybrid of, street gang elements, but they've got the organization. They've learned from the mistakes that MS-13 did. But what's more important is that they've received support from Venezuela, from Maduro. So, and we've clearly seen historically that they've conducted various types of attacks in support of Maduro's beliefs, agenda, things that he wants. They've conducted attacks on his behalf in foreign countries, in Chile, in Peru, in Colombia. So there is definitely the potential that TDA could move into the terrorism branch. The fact that we have now designated them, going after them as terrorist organizations, opens up a huge, array to the menu for the investigating agents from the FBI. A lot of guys that I used to work with and are still working it now have a whole new array of menu out there, financial investigations, different resources, assets, whether it be three-letter agencies that can provide a different type of resource. But going after them financially, going after their banks, going after their booking, it really is going to open up a new front to going after these guys. And I think it's going to be something to see. But the most important thing is to understand is we have to look at these guys as a criminal element and treating them criminally and using those additional resources to really go after them, to find it, the crimes that they're committing, collect the evidence correctly, and then, convict them in a court of law to properly, but using all of the National Security Division resources at our disposal. I think it'll be a great opportunity.
This podcast, we try and keep it, focused on some of the people that are home, maybe give them some answers. And is there anything that you would think of that, you'd like to mention for those mothers who are taking their kids home to school, or those fathers who just regular 9-to-5 job that are so separate and removed from the security world that me and you are very familiar with? Is there something that those concerned minds about this subject that you can either reassure or just give a little bit of context to make it a little bit more comfortable?
Well, that is such a huge, huge question, because there are so many different things that these criminal groups do. And one of the things that I really worked on in New Jersey, when people were saying MS-13 is a big threat when it comes to New York, New Jersey. And I always would say Trinitarios, which is a Dominican gang, are much more dangerous to the community as a whole than MS-13 ever will be. MS-13 is a violent gang, but they don't really move into the other elements, other neighborhoods to exert their strength. They exert their drug trafficking in their neighborhood. They control their streets, their towns. Trinitarios are criminal elements, and I'm using Trinitarios as an example. TDA does the same thing. They will do cyber attacks. They will do the grandma attack. And what surprises me, to answer your question, is how many people don't know the most common scams that are out there, the different threats, the grandma scam, where somebody will call you up and say, I'm representing an attorney who has got your grandson, he's in jail because he ran over, we're going to need $5,000 retainer. We'll send over somebody over to collect that retainer. And people are being taken for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, for each of these scams. And so many people aren't aware of it. So many people aren't aware of the South American theft group, the Chilean group that has been attacking this country for years, hit almost every single state. And knowing these, and it's the training, the knowledge, the reading, that's the most important part. So to say, is there something that you could provide? It's education, it's understanding, it's listening, and not living in a bubble. That's the biggest thing, is not living in a bubble that, hey, my neighborhood is fine. We're fine. No, nowhere is there fine unless you live on a secure compound behind armed guards. But you know what? Even then, someone could get at you via the internet. Someone could get at you, and they're not going to come after you directly. So if you're the prime target, let's say you're the high net worth person or just a member of the family, they're not going to come after you. If they want to steal you, they're going to come after your son and his phone, which has been hacked, which will get access to the Wi-Fi, and then he's able to get into the Wi-Fi and then get into your phone and start draining your bank accounts. There's multiple ways to get to an individual. And I tell my clients always, we don't want to live in a world of fear. Don't live in fear. Live in confidence. Say, all right, I'm going to make myself a hard target to anybody in a criminal element, but it's know your environment. Know the environment here in Bozeman, Montana, or if you live in New Jersey or in Texas. Know what kind of threats you have in your neighborhood and how to prepare for it. The cyber thing is anybody, anywhere, anytime. So those are the things that it's education, it's learning, it's not living in it happens over there. That is the worst attitude to have, to saying, oh, it can't happen to me. It happens to those people in New Jersey, it can happen. Just the other day here in Montana, in Bozeman, Montana, there were 4 Hispanic males that were arrested for a stabbing here for a home invasion right down the street from me. And it's a huge Hispanic community here. We know that Tren de Aragua is in Bozeman. We know that there's a community up here. We know that the cartels are up here, but it's just the people aren't aware of it. And that's just the thing, is just knowledge. It's just learning and knowledge.
Well, so when we talk about Tren de Aragua, there's a lot of people that probably don't think they're in their city. Have they identified some of the major cities that TDA has been kind of taking over?
From the last I've heard, it's in at least 19 states. The major, Chicago, New York. I look at it this way. If there's a community of those people, of that country, El Salvadorian community, let's put it that way. If you have an El Salvadorian community, you have a higher chance that there's an MS-13 member in that community. If there's a Venezuelan community, you're not going to find MS-13 members in there. You're going to find Venezuelan criminal elements. So to believe that there's TDA here, before I even talked to people here in town, I speak to members of the Hispanic community here in town, and they have told me that TDA is here in town. But without even speaking to them, if someone told me there are 3 predominant Hispanic communities here, Mexicans, Hondurans, and Venezuelans, and they're here for construction. They're here for good purposes. They're here to work the construction jobs. There's a high amount of construction here in the area, in the valley. If they were to tell me there's a Venezuelan community, my inkling would be saying, odds are better than not that you have TDA members inside those communities. But again, that's not to say that every Venezuelan is a TDA member. Okay, that's quite the opposite. Most of them are not, but you have to prepare for it. And saying, so I think, somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 members in this country, and in most of the major city populations in the major cities, you're going to have TDA members.
Let's talk about some of these ICE raids. I see them on the internet, and I know a little bit about them. But from your experience and what you do, what are you hearing about these? A lot of people are concerned about them going into schools and getting kids, and so I'm hearing different kind of verbiage on what's actually happening.
Well, I'm hearing the same thing. So I don't have any secret access to behind the scenes to anybody, because, like I said, I've been retired, so I don't talk to those that are in these involved with these raids. But what I understand is saying, listen, they're going down the list. They've had these lists. They know about who are the top members. When I was running my investigations in New Jersey, I knew who the guys were. I knew who they were, if they were deportable or if they were, they could get arrested by immigration. So if there is a final order of deportation on for any one of these individuals, or obviously I'm sure the policy has changed on how they are processed, it's going to be done right. I don't think that there is just a blanket policy of, we're going to round up people. I would hope that there is, to make sure that we're going after the most dangerous ones first. But yet at the same time, I want to make sure that it's balanced and not, jeopardizing an investigation that is, that those people are a subject of. So hopefully that there is, I know that obviously every federal agency is helping ICRO at this time. You got DEA, FBI, even from what I understand, they're looking at IRS agents now to come and help out with the deportations, with the arrests. So I would hope that there is deconfliction to look at and say, okay, we have to go after this individual. And hopefully he's not the subject of an FBI investigation that they've been working on for 4 or 5 months. And then they're just coming in, blazes out of nowhere and taking him and scooping up and jeopardizing an investigation that's been going on for, a racketeering investigation that's going on for 5 years or 5 months. I know that I heard today that there was an indictment out of Tennessee that was unsealed against TDA members. So I'm interested to hear about that. But listen, as long as ICE is, for them, this is their lead. They're the lead agency. They should be in charge and make sure that deconfliction is done across the board. I have no problem with, doing what you have to do. Going in on schools, I don't know. That's I think that's a little bit, because you're going in into a school and 99% of the people that are in there, there's ways that can be done. And I'm sure that, those examples are being a little maybe blown out of proportion. But I think that most, agents which I worked with are going to be logical and say, let's not hit the school. Let's wait until the individual comes out, or let's get there real early and get him before he walks in. I don't think they want to hit the school. I don't think they want to hit a church because A, it's bad optics, and B, but it's correct to make those statements and saying, hey, listen, we can hit a school, we can hit a church. There's no area where we can't go, we won't get you. But I would hope that the case agents use a little bit of logic and say, let's not hit it if we don't have to. So
yeah, no, I agree. I think you're absolutely correct on that. Thinking about the cartel being designated, a terrorist organization. Do you believe that there's going to be any kind of operations? Like when someone says that, it's like, man, then I think about Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you think there's a potential for it to go kinetic, where we actually have tier 1, tier 2 elements going into Mexico and potentially taking out threats? Is that kind of visually, that's what I see?
Listen, I think that's, for me, I don't worry about that. What I worry about is them taking it out on us and here stateside. Yeah. Could I see our tier 1 guys going into Mexico without Mexican authority, without Mexican support? Yeah, I could see, we're doing that either as, because we've already taken shots fired at the border. We already have those 2 warnings of, possibility of drone attacks, which we already know. We've documented that the Mexican cartels have learned from the Ukrainian war to how to utilize drones as an offensive weapon. I'm not really, I do worry about that, our guys going into Mexico, but my worry is the retaliation. They've got 100,000, like I said, 5 or 6 figures of people that are supporting the cartel's operations here in the United States. And they clearly have, a lot of resources. Right now, so a definition of a terrorist group is a group that conducts violence or an act on behalf of their ideology, their ideological attack, right? So ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they're doing it because of their religion, because of their ideology. Cartels aren't doing that right now. They're just, it's a business. They're selling drugs, killing our people because of the drugs, and they're drug trafficking, human trafficking, which is for their business. But if we start conducting the kinetic attacks across the border into Mexico, especially if it's without Mexican support, what's to say they don't become that terrorist organization, which we talk about? So are we creating the terrorist organization by doing those attacks into Mexico? And if they start launching, if they just start telling someone who's really hard up for some heroin or meth or fentanyl and just saying, hey, listen, here you go. I need you to drop this grenade on the 6 train uptown in New York City at 1:00 this afternoon. And they just, that simple thing. You don't think that somebody who's hard up for a hit, hard up for drugs, they'll do anything for that. What is who I look at all the possibilities as terrifying. We see coming out of Mexico all the battles that are going on, the street fighting just between Sinaloa cartel, their little civil war that they got going on now, the fighting that's going on there. If I don't think that will come here, but what I fear is just the single attacks to just cause chaos. That to me is a lot more concerning than us, striking into their country. I think that it's possible, but it's really, it could be a big problem for us.
Yeah, the drone thing is a whole different and fascinating way of seeing war. We're fortunate enough to be able to watch the Ukrainian and Russian war happen in front of us through social media. We're very fortunate to learn some of these tactics, but obviously the enemy learns them as well. But to see those being used and how they're being used overseas is, man, it is.
The thing that fascinated me was this. Not so much the grenade attacks. Yes, the grenade attack, dropping a grenade, or the flamethrowers, or, phosphorus attacks. But what really shocked me was just the noise of a zing coming in and watching the Russian troops. You have a column and then they're scattering. Just the sound that actually doesn't actually conduct an attack. So just a drone and hearing it going meow and coming down messes with with all the troops and messes with mentality. So just the mental attack that is being conducted on, by these drones is worth its weight. It's better than a grenade, because you are now having these troops that are supposed to be in column moving forward are worried about. And then there's video of, I believe it's 2 North Korean troops. So a drone was coming in to attack them, and the drone got in between, and both troops pointed at each other, and one shot at the drone, killing his counterpart. So just the evolution of battle because of these drones has just me absolutely, and we are way behind the curve here in this country to defend this country. So that the discussion of creating an Iron Dome here in the United States, I don't think that it's physically plausible to have similar what they have in Israel, but we need to absolutely up our game and rules of engagement. Who can shoot, who can fire. With especially on the southern border and the northern border. I mean, we've got stories of drones moving in over prisons in New Jersey to drop contraband. I mean, so everything is happening. So there has to be some sort of change here.
You said that we're behind when it comes to drones. How are we behind? What does that mean?
Well, we're behind the curve on defense. So trying to defend ourselves as a nation. I mean, look at what happened in New Jersey. Over in a couple of months ago, everybody's talking about all these drones up in the air. There's 12 drones that are following a Coast Guard cutter, and no one had the answer. And to be honest with you, we still don't have an answer. I know that the Trump administration put out, they were all authorized. Well, if they knew that 3 weeks ago when they announced it, at the Biden administration, we still don't have a clear answer about that. We never got a clear answer about that. But there is no, other than when you're working at like a Sear 1 event, which is like a Super Bowl or a presidential election, when then there's anti-drone weapons that are clearly going to take out, and then there's no fly zones. There is no defense to a Mexican cartel member flying over and dropping munitions on El Paso. How do we defend upon that? I mean, at what point does someone from El Paso PD say, okay, batteries released, you have authorization to fire, red and free? So, like I said, that's what I'm saying is the advancement of technology has way far outpaced our ability to defend against that advancement here in the United States. So I think we're, hopefully Defense Secretary Hegseth, the president, will develop and, clearly try to defend against this vulnerability. I believe it was about a month or two ago, a member of the Wagner group, the Russian mercenary group, was captured at the border coming into the United States, and in his bag was a drone. So he
No
was a
way.
member of the Wagner Group, attempted to enter the United States illegally, but he had a drone. So no one knows what he was going to do with that drone. But the fact of the matter is everyone is using the drones. Everyone's using it for offensive attacks. And we're clearly behind the curve on defenses here in the United States. Like, for example, if you had an illegal drone flying over the, like I said, going over the border into El Paso, who's going to shoot it down? How are they going to shoot it down? Who's going to give the final authority? Is it the mayor? Are they going to do it? Is the chief of police? So there's a lot, not just technology wise, but there's a discussion of who's going to do the authority, who's going to talk about it, so there's a lot to be talked about.
Yeah, the drone thing is different, and I haven't seen much counter drone science out there. I know people talk about it, but it's going to be interesting. I was on the border with one of my buddies, and we thought we saw a drone, and our goal was like run our drone into their drone. But we weren't
Right.
operational or anything. We were just nervous. Like, what are we gonna do? I don't
Right.
know.
And by the time, here the thing is, they're so small, so fast. I mean, even your traditional commercial radars, which, are at an airport, they're not going to detect those drones. And the drones can fly at 5 feet off the ground, just zip across the border. You got border patrol that are on horseback. You get upon that. They cannot run that. Maybe a car could if you're in a vehicle, but if they want to attack the horseback and clear a path for their trafficking group, the human trafficking, boom, 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 just take it out. I mean, it's low speed, low drag, costs $100, maybe $200 per drone. Put a grenade on it. By the time somebody is able to make a decision, it's already too late. The attack has already been conducted.
Yeah, I saw recently one of the cartels used a drone to take out a military general in Mexico, and they put it online, and he's following it. You see the camera and everything, and it was just like, damn, man, like that's some scary stuff. Knowing that the cartel is growing the CJNG, they have their own drone unit internal to them, which is probably far more capable than a lot of our guys. We don't have a lot of drone teams compared to that. I mean, I know
Right.
ours are bigger because of the size of our military, but our military we're not using military members on our borders right now using drones. So it's a scary time.
No, it is. Like I said, that to me is one of our biggest vulnerabilities here. We can throw number of troops, we can throw hardware, we can throw aircraft. I mean, no, clearly the cartel is not going to go. They can't toe to toe with us in air. Our 6-man team, whatever, special ops guys, tier 1 guys, they could take them out. But they have advantages on us on some things. So, and that to me is one of our biggest vulnerabilities and biggest advantages that they can do.
There was a message that the cartel sent, via social media saying like they have no intentions of attacking us, no intentions of causing any harm to federal agents or federal employees. And that's kind of a sign of like, we don't want no problems. But in my head, if we continue to stop the movement on the border like we have been, the numbers have been dramatic. There's been a dramatic shift in numbers coming across. As they start to lose money, don't you think that it gets to a point where they're going to feel like they have to do something to make their money, at least the lower end people?
When we impact their purse, that attitude is going to change. They're going to say, okay, we don't have it. We don't want it. We don't want to have conflict with U.S. forces. But when you start, affecting the bottom line, they're going to say, okay, what do we need to do to change that? We want to make money. That's what they want to do. They want to make profit. And they're not going to take well to being told no, and they're not going to take well to, whatever institution. Now, obviously, they're going to, adjust. And I've written about it in one of my articles where, Sinaloa supposedly has moved a lot of their meth labs to Canada and is working with MCs, coming out of supposedly HA. They're working with the MCs, to move the product south across the northern border. Canada disputes that. The Prime Minister Trudeau would state that that's not factually true, but it is true. I mean, you can see it. I mean, one of the things that really shocked me the most was about a month ago, about 6 weeks ago, there was a load of 825 kilos of product that was seized in Canada. That's not the shocking part. The shocking part is that it crossed the southern border with Texas, traveled across the United States in an 18-wheeler, and then crossed into Canada. So 825 kilos got through a checkpoint on an 18-wheeler. That to me is shocking. When they say, okay, they show a pickup truck that got ripped open and then there's 15 kilos. But this was an 18-wheeler with 825 kilos that traveled across the entire contiguous United States all the way north in Canada. That to me is concerning. And then there's been seizures coming south, when they were attempting to leave Canada, come into the United States. So they're going to go when you have a river that's flowing in a certain direction and then you put it, that river is going to keep flowing in another way. They're going to want to continue going. The river's not going to stop unless you put a dam up. But if there's other opportunities, the river's going to go in that direction. Right now, the northern border, to me, is the new front. I mean, we're putting a good hold on, activities at the southern border, and we're putting a nice strong plug on it. But that northern border is I think quite vulnerable because it's huge. I mean, just here in my state of Montana, you got a huge border with Canada, and a lot of it is not as detected and tracked as the Mexican border. You have a lot of woods, a lot of mountains. So having somebody put a backpack on with, 10 keys, at 36,000 a kilo, I'll tell you what, I think somebody will do that.
Yeah, it's something that, hasn't had a lot of focus, and I think it is important. And, there's so many different things that happen in Canada that, maybe the audience doesn't understand, but like the connection to China, the ease of transport when it comes to some of the maritime stuff that happens up in Canada, it's definitely an area that we need to pay more attention to. One of
the things you just talked, sorry to interrupt you, but it's really key that here in America, we don't have, yes, we're afraid of the Mexican cartel. We're afraid. China is the biggest threat right now because of what they've done. They've quietly moved in. We are the frog, okay? We are the frog, and China has started to turn up the water, and we are going to boil. They have taken over major seaport in Peru. They bought a major seaport in Peru for $2 billion, and they own this major seaport. If China controls the Panama Canal and these other seaports along the Pacific, they have a stranglehold on operations in the Pacific Ocean. That's setting them up for possible move-in invasions to Taiwan. China has been, and that's why they call it the pink wave. Throughout South America, the Chinese influence in Peru, in Chile, in Colombia, in Ecuador has been tremendous. They come in and they buy up, build new roads, new this. And that's why they boost up certain individuals into power in politics. The pink wave has been a movement that people don't recognize here in the United States because it's not here. And that's why I've always been saying is that one of the things I've always tried to speak out in your podcast and Andy's podcast is saying, listen, we need to pay more attention to Latin America. Because that's right here. Okay. Those criminal elements are right here, whether it be Chilean organized crime, TDA, cartels. This is the threat right now because the Chinese moving into these countries, and the China is moving into these countries, Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, Chile, and they're setting up seaports that they're controlling, that it is a huge, huge threat to national security of the United States and potential if there is conflict. In the future, if there's an invasion of Taiwan, the U.S. Pacific Fleet will not be able to handle this. So there has to be support. So what are they going to do? Go all the way around the Cape Horn to South America? Because if the Panama Canal gets shut down by the Chinese, U.S. warships are not going to go through there. So I think China really is a big, big problem that people just don't, they're not aware of.
No, I think you're right. And man, I appreciate your all your expertise on this. If you don't mind, can you tell the audience where they can find more information? And I do want that article because I'll try and post it with this episode.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. So I have a Substack. It's Brunner Sierra Group. at substack.com. My website is brunersierragroup.com. And you can find me on Twitter at Daniel Brunner1 or X, whatever it's called now these days. But yeah, feel free. And Substack is the best way to really, get a hold of me and, read up on my, the things I talk about. Every subject. There's nothing that I stay with. I don't only talk about gangs. I talk about the latest threats, the latest trends, and people want to learn and educate themselves. So what you said at the beginning of this podcast, that's the best way, is just say, listen, I do 2 to 3 minute articles. I'm getting ready to launch a podcast, which is just going to be short, 3 to 4 or 5 minute, me talking to them, basically talking about the article, not reading the article, but I'm going to be just talking to you about the articles. So if you're on the gym or you drive it, you quickly can get the article just by listening to it. So I'm getting ready to launch that. But I would love to, I'm always open to topics. I talk about everything, latest threats, latest trends, latest crime waves and things like that. So, but feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rocco.